good evening, and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Aileu in Timor-Leste, or as we say in the United States, East Timor. Of course, the funny geography fact about East Timor is that Timor and Leste both mean east, so it is east. But moving on, Timor-Leste, as you can see, makes up mostly half of the island of Timor here in the Lesser Sunda Islands. All the yellow you can see around it is Indonesia, which is very important to its history. Aileu is a district. It's actually landlocked just south of the capital city of Dili. What's really interesting about Aileu is that it is the home of the second largest ethnic group in East Timor, known as the Mambai. Aileu is part of their language. It means bent tree. It's interesting. Apparently a tree that grows in the area grows without branches or leaves or anything in the early part of its lifespan, and it kind of grows up and starts to kind of bend and wobble and makes chair shapes, so that's where the name comes from. This area is pretty mountainous. The city of Aileu is in a little kind of like a canyon here. There's some big muddy rivers that flow through here from the mountains. Aileu is right on one of them. I'll show you on Google Earth later. But that kind of muddy, kind of mountainous landscape allows for certain crops to thrive, especially rice. They also grow coffee and tobacco here. And the district is mostly made up of very tiny little villages in the mountains. Pretty much all I could find about geography. I really scoured to find some interesting facts, but it's just a little tiny corner of a little tiny country, so that's all I've got for you. Let's talk about its history. And I also scrambled everywhere to find any historical things that happened there before the 1900s, and could not find much other than just random things about the Mambai, most of which were not in English. So, yeah, just know that this is like kind of the homeland, kind of like this area here of the Mambai. Dili is also a Mambai word. I don't know for what though, I didn't reach that far in my research. Historically, the Portuguese would have taken over all of Indonesia during its colonial times. And as Portuguese colonies and Portugal in general kind of weakened in international power, their colonized land shrank until we just have this half of an island. So the people here, obviously not fans of the Portuguese. It kind of reached a head in 1903 when there was an open rebellion. But the Portuguese really held fast. You know, they only had very tiny pockets around the world, and they weren't about to let them go. It was eventually pried from them by the Japanese during World War II. Japan invaded here. I think they invaded Timor in 1941, but it wasn't until 1942 when the town of Aileu was officially occupied. And what's interesting is that, from what I can tell, the Japanese never actually entered Aileu. Very mountainous and remote and not really important to their interests. It was occupied by Timorese allies from Dili. So, and Japan held it, but I don't think any Japanese person actually occupied like the valley here. But they were in control during World War II. After World War II, the area was handed back to Portugal, but the people here very much wanted their independence. They're very adamant about that. Indonesia recently became fully independent, and they were like, well, these people, one, we used to be a Portuguese colony and they're a Portuguese colony. Two, they're on one of our islands, so it should belong to Indonesia. And from what I can tell, most of the people on Timor-Leste were very much opposed to becoming part of Indonesia. They actually held a referendum and they voted to become independent and not part of Indonesia. Indonesia was not pleased and they pretty much just invaded. It was a very violent invasion and very violent occupation, including in Aileu. There was an insurrection in 1975 that failed, and by, what was it? I think it was by 1979, Timor-Leste had become part of Indonesia unwillingly. And it was a very, like I said, a very vicious occupation. When it kind of came to light in the 1990s, what was going on in this little corner of the world, people, especially in the West, were pretty horrified that these people were living under the military might of Indonesia. It reached a boiling point in the late 1990s at a time known as the East Timor crisis, when the people here were like, we're not going to put up with this anymore, and Indonesia answered very violently. In Aileu in particular, a lot of areas were burnt down, livestock slaughtered, and Aileu actually, I believe, was pretty much like destroyed, like burnt to the ground. But once, this reached the international news and people were like, this has to stop, the UN got involved, Indonesia pulled out, Timor-Leste became independent in, I think, 2004. Again, I didn't write this down. This is all from memory. I'm pretty sure they achieved full independence in 2004. And when they were deciding on the capital, Aileu almost became the capital city. But Dili was kind of always the economic and commercial hub of East Timor, so it became the capital. And life there is pretty quiet, countryside kind of culture. It's really interesting. So, very long road to get where we are to today, but here we are. Probably as peaceful as it ever has been. There are some issues with like hunger and getting the right kind of supplies in the area. It's almost like a third world country, to be honest, but they are just kind of going about their way. Let me see if I can barely see the borders of Aileu here. It's very faint, but you can really see all the mountains here, right? Here's the town. Cute slideshow, but it doesn't really show any of the town. So there's the town. This is the mountainous area. And let me zoom out so you can see exactly where we are if you don't know where Indonesia is or anything. So here is Timor. There's Indonesia, hello. There's Australia down here. We're not going to talk about the relationship between Australia and East Timor. That's a whole other bag of worms, but this is where we are in the world. You can see Asia's up here. It's Papua New Guinea, the island of Sulawesi right up there, the Philippines. That's where we are in the world. So think very tropical, hot, humid kind of climate, right? Let's take a look at this town. Here you can see this kind of river system flowing down from the mountains out to here. But at least on this day that this was taken, this river is not very full. See, like here's the town, but we'll look at that in a second. You can see the water in there, and this is just all like cakey, dried mud. It's a very muddy river. Here is the town. This is a monument here to Nicolau Lobato. I believe he was involved in the insurrection in the 70s. There's another monument. I scoured this town trying to find it, and I couldn't. It's in a graveyard. There's a monument to some Portuguese soldiers who stood up against the Japanese occupiers in World War II. They were all killed. It's a little, like, missionary area up here and up here around the public schools. And you can see lots of the farmland here. Down here, that's definitely... Do you think that's rice? Probably, right? Down there by the water. And up in the hills, we can see some areas of farmland there. Looks like we can go 3D, so we can actually see kind of the mountainous area here. Yep, right here in this little valley is Aileu. Now, I was reading, like, the one tourist site for, like, the areas of Timor-Leste, and it said you have to see the lagoon. It's where people go on hot days and relax. And I was looking all over, like, lagoon. Where's a lagoon? And then I finally found it. Look at this. It looks really, muddy. It doesn't look like something I would go swimming and relaxing in, but maybe it's just from above. Maybe just because it's surrounded by all of these patches of farmland here. But this is apparently the place to go in the summertime. How interesting is that? And I looked at all the other little towns here. Could not find much in Aileu. Solway Creek, I think I saw some interesting little things. Let's see. Just this guy posing for selfies. But yeah, you can really see just how craggy mountainous this area is, huh? Lots of little interesting ridges. Isn't that neat? But yes, like I said, this is a little tiny corner of a little tiny country. Let's see if there's anything in this village. Nope, there is not. So, that's pretty much all that I have for you for tonight. If I remember, I'll link my video about East Timor up in the corner. If I remember to put it up there. If not, just yell at me in the comments and I'll add it. Because it is a very intricate, fascinating history of this place. And all they've wanted was just to be left alone and doing their own thing. In a roundabout way, they pretty much have it. What they've always wanted. So that's where I'm going to leave you for tonight. If you liked this kind of content, look at this sweet face here. Hold on. How cute is that? Looks like she's going to school. Look how cute. If you're interested in this kind of content, please consider subscribing, because looking at little corners all over the world is going to be a long-term thing on my channel. Next, we are going to the Marshall Islands to look at some very tiny atolls that I assure you have never heard of before. I mean, unless you're from the Marshall Islands, but nonetheless. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out, and I really hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good night. Good night.